I want to say several things to people, particularly who are getting this from afar, whether it be now or at some time later. I receive inquiries and observations primarily right now from people in other cities who have not really been exposed to me and this for any great length of time, but some of you have lingering aspects of these same kind of questions. That has to do with you listening to what's going on. That is, at least on these nights of me just talking, of listening with the old senses. Now, for a long time, you can't help it. We cannot fall in by any means of playing what the ordinary would-be religious people would do, to suddenly say, all right, everyone in here, swear your allegiance to the red God up here, or the green God. Admit that you're now a new person. If you say that you will follow our precepts and pay your money, you're a new person, and what you're going to hear is a new message from the gods. That has a purpose, and there is a certain kind of reality to it. But for a long time, and it comes and goes, is you people still hear what you are wired up to hear. And what I'm getting to specifically is a new round of inquiries and observations from afar. And as I said, many of you, it still strikes you, no matter the warnings I have given, which are not some kind of justification for my jokes. But I am now getting a new round of inquiries, people believing they have some problem with humor. And particularly those who have been exposed just to me a few times and are getting these tapes, they seem to find much laughter going on in the audience. And then they have heard or read me saying something about humor and hostility and about being life's critic. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific, and this is not directed to any of you people in other cities who have written me or made observations, because you are not in some way falling drastically behind. And it's not that you are personally deluded. Humor is just one area, but it is exemplary, having to do with what everyone is wired up to hear. And it makes no difference if I, or Buddha, or Moses, or we could dig up someone else, could come forward and say, listen, I'm going to talk to you, but I'm going to have to play music. I'm going to have to use words that you people know, but certain of the things I say, I don't mean it the way you're wired up to hear it. Now, I will not care to speculate how much humor those aforementioned famous prophets used. But, as all of you people know, I seem continually to throw in things that elicit some laughter. Some of you still don't know whether I intend it. Some of you feel at times that I make some sort of solecism, or I put my foot in a fox pass hole. And maybe I didn't know it. You know, I just steam right along and I keep a dead pan. But I want to go into humor because it exemplifies the way people are wired up. Now, first, let me state again. In the same way that there's an absolute condition here insofar as I can enforce it, which is far enough to keep everyone more or less in line until you see it for yourself, I will not allow any hostility among you people. It does not produce, nor do I try to encourage you to come up with any sort of sham or attempted acting to one another of, oh, how I love you, how great it is that you're here. You know, I've finally let hugs take over. Anybody that wants to hug one another. But it's not a matter of, ooh, I love you, and it's us against the world. But you cannot have the routine hostility, the routine tension, the routine transfer of energies that hold the rest of society together. You cannot have that as the basis. You cannot even have it as a mid-structure in this kind of group going unchecked. And I have pointed out, and I reiterate, you cannot be cynical. You cannot be sarcastic, not just to people in this group, but you would be on very dangerous ground, whether you were sober or whether it was St. Quantum's Day and you had had a few tokes or a few drinks, and you suddenly came out with some racial or religious remark. I assume you know, even if you told a joke, I assume you people know that that would probably be the end of you. And it's not because of simple moral reasons, and it's not because I am here to defend any race, religion, nationality. But you cannot entertain those voices of cynicism, of sarcasm, and that all it amounts to is you playing out your routine role as being a critic. That you cannot do it. And so people, to get back where I started, still have some question that they believe that they're having a particular problem with the question of humor and hostility, and especially since I seem to engage in it. And of course, some people, they have not necessarily detailed it verbally this specifically, but they're wondering, do I know what I'm doing? Do I not make jokes at someone's expense? Maybe I do say, now look, I'm not laughing at some group of people. Many times you've heard me in public discourses, and I did it with you, I've pulled out the Pope. And to use an example, I point out to you it had nothing to do with the Pope, had nothing to do with Catholicism, had nothing to do with any religion. He was just an archetype for me to pull out. If there was a rabbi of a similar stature, if there's that many Jews in the world, I'd be using him. But still it strikes people's hard wiring, oftentimes, that regardless of my caveats, regardless of me apparently trying to free myself from it, that they wonder, am I not making jokes? Let me repeat again. Once you begin to hear, and I tell you even before you do, and you should hear the truth of this, it's not an explanation from me, but I do not laugh at anyone. And I'm not using me specifically, personally, as your example, because you're not to grow up and be me. Yeah, that's right. You're not. I do not laugh at anyone. And I'm saying I now on the basis that you would not either. And you could engage in humor, but you have to reach the point that you clearly see that you literally equals everyone else. Now the humor that I make, if you want to go back, or as we go along, if you want to try and dissect some of it, I'll try one more time. I've mentioned this in the last several weeks, but let me try perhaps in a different verbal manner. I do not laugh at people, because what I'm making jokes at, or about, are not people. In a sense, I don't even see people. What I am seeing is like the complex and oftentimes stumbling process of the great life experiment. And that's it. But the humor, although it is quite possible, it's nothing extraordinary, that you, of course especially the people that show up at my infrequent public sojourns, can believe, well, hey, he just made a joke at somebody's expense or some group of people. But if you listen, and you're getting the ability to hear any aspect beyond your own hardwired senses, including the possible sixth one, there is no hostility in it. There is no one to laugh at. But you know by now that I will, especially after the meetings, us being together, I can sit around and about the only thing I will discuss, but the only thing that you can keep me in conversation about, ends up being a continual series of laughs. But there is no one to laugh at. And another thing that I know has happened once or twice, and I'm sure that some of you do it or some of you entertain the voices inside of you. Let me tell you something even further, is you are not to make jokes at your own expense. That is, you are not to. If you're a Buddhist, you're not, because you're a Buddhist, to go around to other people and make Buddhist jokes. That's no excuse to say, well, I'm a Buddhist, and so therefore it's not like anti-Buddhism that somebody else may make a joke at my religion or my culture. I can do it. No, you can't. That's as much forbidden as it is to make a joke at somebody else's expense, some other culture or religion or race. Because you can't do it to yourself. That's no excuse. And something else that has popped up several times is some of the newer people. And again, if it's happening to some of the newer people, there's still voices in some of you that arise and you take serious note of it. Me using Alabama, or sometimes I look in the camera to the people in New York and say New Jersey. Let me tell you one more time. It has nothing to do with a geographical location. Absolutely nothing. I'm not using Alabama as some physical archetype of there being conservative, rednecks, dumb, illiterate, uncouth, incult, unsophisticated people. It's got nothing to do with that. I'm talking about the nervous system of you, of everyone. It's not a group of people. I'm not using Alabama as synonymous with dumb-looking, thick-necked guys driving pickup trucks. It's got nothing to do with that. I am talking about the mining and manufacturing red department level in you. It is alive in all of you, and it is alive to the point that you have got to hear it talk. You have got to hear when I attempt to direct a message to it. You've got to hear when I direct messages to some of the other levels talking about what's going on down there. But it's got nothing to do with the place. It's got nothing to do with any type of person. And it's got nothing to do with any person in particular. We're talking about everyone's nervous system. And I simply use Alabama as synonymous with the bottom of your nervous system, with the older, with the less sophisticated, but remember, we're not talking about people now, the less knowledgeable, the less pliable, the less liberal, the less progressive parts of your nervous system, and hence everyone's nervous system. But it has nothing whatsoever to do with Alabama. Alabama is just a sitting duck, the same way as the Pope was. And that's all there is to it. And you cannot entertain any voices in you that think or tell you that I use Alabama as a synonym for a Polish joke. Let's assume you were Polish and you thought, well, I'll just, every time he says Alabama, I'll really work on myself and I'll assume that he is just trying to cover up an attempted Polish joke. And since I'm Polish, I'll stick my name in there instead of Alabama and it'll be all right. And it's not all right. You have no more right, there is no more benefit of you laughing at yourself. And I start off mentioning on a cultural or religious or racial basis. It's not just that. You got no right to make any joke about yourself, period, until you see what it is. I know some of you, and the rest of the people will get this at some other time, the same thing would happen to them. If they did get around me after the first few times and we're sitting around, I have been known to suddenly make a joke and make up something and say, well, let me tell you the time I did so-and-so. You know, which could be true and it may not be true. It doesn't matter. That sounds like I'm saying something that I did. But it's got nothing to do with I. Or I would say, boy, I did so-and-so, and it sounds like there is the epitome of stupidity. And you can laugh along. Obviously, meant it's some sort of joke, but I wasn't talking about me. You got no right. It is just forbidden, and you surely should begin to see it, to make any joke at your own expense. You got to be able to see what you are. You got to be able to see what life is to even do it verbally. But to make some joke to yourself now about how dumb I am, how clumsy I am, at the very least, it is a waste of time. At the very most, remember this, I want to, in paragraph 2, draw your attention back to the 3 mortal infrasystems, of the muscles, the mind, and the respiratory system. And I want to give you a crude sketch that I'll possibly go into in the not distant future, having to do with a certain kind of fueling to all 3 of those infrasystems, of the muscles, the mind, and the respiratory system, equaling fun, equaling entertainment. I was giving a perhaps pregnant pause as best a man can do. Should you sit and ponder what is going on in life, sit at the beach, sit out in the park, sit at home, look at TV, look up here at the screen if you know how to control it, and whatever strikes awareness is being people engaged in the attempt to have fun, to entertain themselves. Do they have anything in common? I don't mean that just volleyball and horseshoes both are called sports. They do have something in common that's not recognized. is that all three of those mortal infrasystems of the muscles and the mind and the respiratory system itself, based upon the wiring system of the particular people involved, they are motivated to pursue what seems to be some form of entertainment, to amuse themselves, to involve themselves in a pleasurable way, based upon fueling either one or more simultaneously of those three infrasystems. I'm trying to resist even giving any examples, and maybe I'll succeed. But you can look easily enough, by now all of you, and look at any sort of entertainment, people out involved in amusing themselves, and surely one or two examples in at least two of those infrastructures should strike you immediately without any question that, there's people doing so and so, and there's no doubt, no matter what else, they are obviously fueling and pleasurably feeding the muscles. And probably as equally obvious would be an example that you would say there is somebody or some group of people involved with a certain activity that they seem to find pleasurable. They do it of their own volition. It's not a job. And no matter what else may be going on, surely it is directly fueling a pleasurable sensation in the mind. All right. I've said this once or twice, and nobody's cried to me directly, but I know that some of you had voices that the first time I said it, you found it annoying. It's me to say entertainment, that everything is entertainment. The first time I said it was showbiz. I said, it's all showbiz. And now we're filming these, and I started, instead of showing up in shorts every time, you notice, and I dress up sometimes. It's showbiz. But let me use tonight the word entertainment. This is entertainment. There is no exception to entertainment. But part of what we're all going to have to be up to, part of me starting to move this out into God knows what, is this, is religion is entertainment. That is no sarcasm, that is no cynicism, that is an unknown reality. There is no exception. Religion is no exception. That it's all entertainment. But where religion is now is at a dead end because everyone has heard the jokes before. The only thing from a certain viewpoint, it is, of course, as always, not as simplistic in a linear fashion as my words would have it. But we all try and remember that, don't we all? As a new generation will come along, and you have a new pope, you have a new minister, you have a new rabbi, you have a so-called new form of some occult, mystical organization. But it's the same old jokes. The new generation can respond in a slightly refreshed manner because they have not heard the jokes as often as their father had. But it has reached a level that it's already become part of the line level consciousness of everyone, that inside of every religion, inside of every culture, even the new generations, it's already down in the genetics, that they're already born in a sense that they've heard all the jokes. That you can have a minister come out and he's got a new show. He's up to date. Instead of just carrying along a piano player, he's now got an 8-piece band. The music sounds a little more like contemporary rock. He's still waving a Bible, let us say, in Christianity. But it's the same jokes. I'm using that in a very specific sense, since I said it's all entertainment. It's the same jokes that everyone who walked that stage before him, in that religion and all others, but to use Christianity, they've all told the same jokes. There's only so many verses in the damn Bible. And they've used them over and over. And so everyone's heard the jokes now almost genetically, and it's getting very thin. But it's all entertainment, including this. Are you going to tell me, I ask rhetorically, that you have not been entertained throughout your time here? You think, I don't always, or it does not always seem to have the full or the same effect when I make the sometimes public appearances, but I have been pointing it out a little more and giving the hints, and those of you that have been out on these trips for the last 4 weeks, you know, I made it a little more obvious now. I started putting back on my jewelry, got light shows, got music, and I'm saying more or less the same thing that you heard me say a year ago when I went out, but it's entertainment. I don't ask anything of the people. We don't take a collection. It doesn't say, great spiritual teacher will be here tonight. It's entertainment. And the picturization that I've used several times, maybe perhaps all of you have not heard it, but I pointed out to some of those groups in the last year when I began my somewhat extemporaneous speech, which I'll point out parenthetically, even I am beginning to retell some of my jokes. Not exactly, those of you keeping track. I'm that good because I have the ability, this is all parenthetically. I have the ability, I never repeat it exactly, those of you that really think you're good. But, into parentheses, I have pointed out to some of the people that, in a sense, I was having to do what jazz musicians do. That if it was a rather conservative jazz musician, like a David Sanborn, let us say, that would come out and play a song that was been a hit a year ago, most people knows, and he plays the melody through, and then he comes back through and he embellishes on it. He tries to improvise a bit on it, or he tries to put his own interpretation, restate the melody in his own way, etc. And then there would be those that would be closer to what used to be called free jazz, that someone comes out and he simply picks up his horn and tries to play, as much as his muscles especially will let him, try and play something that he's never played. And of course, if he gets even mechanically good, he tries to get this going. They don't explain it to themselves this way, I'm doing it for them. And he tries to say somewhere ahead of himself, his muscles, as to what is my fingers about to play, and whatever it is, I'll do anything but that. To the majority of people, it sounds like noise, even today. But the kind of entertainment I have been doing with the general public, see, is walking a fine line. It's not just me, it's been everybody involved with this that ever did it publicly, is you can't really come out and engage in totally free jazz. That is, I would come out and I would try and bring back from tomorrow, bring back above the level of consciousness only that which had no relationship, which had no immediate ability to trigger mechanical associations in the hearers, and do it. But I'm not going much further except to point out that in a sense it would come out gibberish. That would be totally irrational, even if I used English words. And so it is like having to go back and forth, that it sounds like what I'm about to say has some bearing on everyday life, or it sounds as though I may be about to make a comment on religion, upon the Boy Scouts or the Mets or anything, and then get people up to the point that I can almost take an unknown right angle, and it takes you somewhere, if you were following it, that you would have never gotten to. Of course, oftentimes, that just culminates in a laugh, and I seem to end the measure there, or I end the chorus, and I go somewhere else. And of course, now many of you are getting to the point that you, in a sense, can do that to yourself. There is a particular way in which I'm about to end this paragraph that you need to see. I'm not being cute, I'm not being in any way ordinarily funny, and I'm not indirectly trying to cast a negative reflection upon other activities, but I'm telling you everything, in a sense, that goes on in human life is entertainment, and this is no exception. Contraire. If it is not entertainment, if it had not been entertainment, you would have never heard of Confucius or Buddha or Moses. Again, whether they had the astounding sense of humor that I do, it was entertainment, or you would not have heard of them. But try and remember this. with what I started out this paragraph, that the fueling of those three mortal infrastructures, those infrasystems of the muscles, the mind, and the respiratory system. And what I point out, although I didn't give an example, now I assume you people plugged in your own blanks there when I said some of it would obviously be fueling in a pleasurable way the muscles. People out playing volleyball, no matter what else is going on. Or if you saw people engaged in a chess match, whatever else may be going on, obviously there's some direct pleasant fueling of the mind. Well, the kind of examples I did not even hint at, I just mentioned, was the possibility of it feeding more than one of those infrasystems. Well, can you take it a bit further and at least speculate, if it doesn't strike some of you as soon as I get it out of my mouth, or maybe some of you are already ahead, when this thing operates right, whether it's coming from me or you doing it to yourself, it fuels in a pleasurable way. It entertains all three systems. On a little more of an apparent personal nature, let me try and direct your attention to this. That in these infrasystems, those three, the muscles, the mind, and the respiratory system, they do not ordinarily directly support one another's plans. For instance, the muscles do not ordinarily support the plans that let's say the mind. Now, all this, of course, I am isolating what apparently is one manifestation simply to one system, and all of you should remember that things are not quite that clean cut, but the description is fair to get you started. So let us say it was a man's mind, and I could use the respiratory system as well, but let's say it's his mind decided, I am going back to night school. Here I am married, and I've been out of school all this time, but I'm in a dead-end job, and the only way I'll get anywhere is to go back and to go into graduate school, and the way I can do it is at night. I'm going to have to come home, try to take a quick shower, or maybe go directly from work, and I've got to go down there 3 nights a week. Let us say that that is a plan from the mind, from that infrasystem. Ordinarily, none of the other systems are going to directly support it. For instance, the muscles. Man's been working all day. Given those two systems, let me carry this example further, or a little further. It is not the muscles that's going to take that man, when he gets through with work, to go out there and loosen his tie, throw some water in his face, try to get a cup of coffee, drive across town and sit in some class at the age of 35 for 2 hours, 3 nights a week. It is not his muscles that are going to take him there. They're not even going to support it, ordinarily. And by the same token, you might reverse that situation, and I point out that ordinarily the mind, that infrasystem, is not going to directly support the muscles thing of, I'm going out and run. I feel I'm going out and run. Ordinarily, the other systems are not going to directly support the plans of one of the other systems. I am going to stop it there with one of those big old arrows of hint, hint, because there is a great practical use of that. Like many things that I'll throw in again that perhaps I don't remind some of you enough of, especially those afar. Almost all of this I can crudely put into when I start drawing new maps or trying to direct you to try to trick you to go at some right angle than you would have normally gone in any of the systems. Whether it's me physically getting you to do something or me apparently getting you in the respiratory system to apparently emotionally go out and do something you wouldn't have done, to act it. Or for me to attempt to get you to do something up here, which this is always involved with, but sometimes it seems like tasks are specifically directed to this, but all of it eventually has to get here. That oftentimes has just a glancing blow to the other systems. That is, if you can drag all three systems in some small way into what you're attempting to do, what apparently is noise, what apparently is automatic and even very strong resistance, I hint to you, undergoes a very unusual transformation. And you start out on any of this, back to what I was going to put to you as rather two crude signposts, is trying first, through neuralizing, through what every other means you can take. You don't have to just stand around at all times and feel as though it's still the concept of neuralizing is choking you or is immobilizing you. Ponder it. Think about it. Wonder about it. Pursue it, as long as you don't let the yellow circuit just run it through the same old departments and come back with the same information. It's the disruption of that. Is the immediate use by me coming up with this neuralizing thing. But it's first to see, to find out for yourself that there is an absolute reality to this that I had never suspected, never heard of, would never found. There is a reality to this that I can see. That is what almost everyone, just the way we're wired up, that everyone wants to bypass that and to tell me and themselves, well, wait a minute, I hear a whole lot of this. Boy, this is great. How can I do it? And I tried to do what I thought I heard you say. I tried to put that into practical use, and I fell down. In a certain sense, you've got to be able to see it on your own before you really deal with doing it. Let me mention something about so-called mystical states, a kind of relationship to these three infrasystems. Mystical states, how about it? Let's include the so-called conversions of people undergoing in whatever religion that they seem to, they claim to, throughout history, have undergone some very deep-seated, basic conversion, the normal term being used, or always been used, that in some way I have been reborn, that I am absolutely not the same person I was when I walked into this temple, when I met this religious group, or when I was confronted with this spiritual organization, that I am no longer the same person. And as I've been trying to hint to you slightly for the last several weeks, that is worthy of your neuralization. That what is going on? Let me give you one thing, an area to pursue. It's what seems to be one's conversion, what seems to be people. Absolutely. It just seems undeniable have undergone some kind of change. How about this? Is that kind of change being loosed from the full hole of the memories stored in those three infrasystems? All right, I won't give up yet. You do recall I pointed out the departments had their own filing system, the red and the blue and the yellow level, that they had their own storage system, where the muscles, the mind, and the respiratory system have their own distinct memory. I pointed out to you some of the way people react in the different systems, like when confronted by death in the family, great fear. They each one have their own memory. They're, of course, interrelated like everything else, but there is a distinct place that the mind, the muscles, and the respiratory system file their own memory. Now, how about this feeling that people have? A glaring example I keep bringing up that I assume is most available to all of you, that you don't even have to leave your house, is in any city, turn on these religious channels, and you've got these Protestant ministers, normally, pacing the stage, hollering at the audience, telling them that God's going to get them, telling the same old jokes, and then normally concluding with an appeal in some way for you people to straighten up. Come down here, walk down the altar, or send in your name, or put your hand on the TV set, as long as your socks aren't wet, and at least say to yourself, or say out loud, speak to me, and say, I have missed the mark, I have not lived correctly, I know I'm wrong, you know, may the gods forgive me, and you'll be a new person. And you can sit there at home. I assume all of you know this. And there you'll see hundreds, thousands of people, perhaps, that will say, yes, something happened to me. I just walked up here, or I just stood here and I said, yes, I hadn't lived right, but by God, from now on, I'm going to straighten up. And they say, I feel differently. And their little face breaks into a smile, and they want to hug everyone. No memory, no guilt. All right, I still won't give up. Although I keep pointing out to you that what passes for change out in the ordinary world is not really change from the viewpoint that would do you any good. The few people ever pursuing this, ordinary change will not do, as you should know. You can't go out and follow some self-help method. You can't go out and try to improve your memory, to improve your posture, to improve your health. It won't do. But then I at times refer to real change. If I write it sometimes, when I used to write, I'd put it in capital R, capital C. I'd put in quotation marks that there is real change. All right, how about this? Real change is in no memory. As long as those three infrasystems have basically the same memory down in the muscles and the mind and in the respiratory system, forget what the memory was. And of course, absolutely forget where it came from, because it came from genetics. It didn't come from the environment. So forget that, all right, I've got bad memories in my muscles from my mother beating on me, or from my father always saying, hey, you walk like a sissy. You know, that's had some kind of great trauma on me, that I hear what you're saying. I've got bad memories in my muscles from so-and-so. Now, everyone does. But can you see that anything that passes for change that does not, in one or more, the more the better, even on the ordinary level, does not free you from the full hold of those memories? They could be just in one, just in the muscles. That can pass for conversion. That someone can say, I feel like a new person, whether it's religious, or they're in analysis, or drugs, or talking to a tarot card reader. That something seems to happen, and if you can free the absolute whole, that is the old whole, the standard whole of the memories in one of the systems, somebody's going to feel as though something out of the ordinary happened. You get it into more than one of those systems, and they really feel it extraordinary. None of you have ever wondered about all the rituals in religion? Not that they know what they're doing. Life knows sort of what it's doing. But in all the mystical religions, and all these people dressed in uniforms, there's music, there's architecture, there's things to assault the different senses, all the way down to the crude Baptist churches. They're just plain buildings, but they got people playing on bass drums. They got a minister shouting. And then they got people coming up after the shouting goes over, and other members of the congregation come up and hug you and want to cry with you. It's an assault. It's an attempted entertaining assault on as many of those systems as life can manage in that one situation. All right, back to my picturization of igniting the circuitry above the level where it is now. The future now of it absolutely existing. Which, any of you who still think that was just a cute phrase I made up with a slash between future and now, anytime those voices tell you that, you can always ask them, where the hell did I get all this? Because that's exactly where it comes from. At any rate, can you see, based upon what verbal pictures I've been attempting to sketch, that if we were dealing with being able to be conscious somewhere above all known ordinary limits. I can't bend over, I forgot. Of consciousness into what would be a future now, into an area that through your own trickery, whatever it is been going on, through my trickery, through you going along with it, that suddenly you start having flashes, what else can you call it, that you seem to be conscious in a way that just almost bears no resemblance to everything else that you've experienced other than the fact that you're still sane, you're still standing up. But in the ordinary sense, do you realize those new circuits have no hardwired memory? Well, of course, throughout the history of man, you have had people repeating variations of the phrase, know the truth and the truth shall set you free. That just almost grabs anybody on a good day who's sane and fairly sober. That it just strikes everyone's nervous system that there is some great validity, there is some great secret there, that yes, yes, I agree with that, whatever the hell it means. But can you conceive of consciousness without memory as being that truth? Whereas at the ordinary level, the circuits respond to this idea, ye shall know the truth, or if you knew the truth, or there is a certain truth, were it known, would set you free. And inside your little system wants to go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then look for where is this truth? Where can I find it? You know, who is hiding it? Who can rephrase it? Who can translate it from the great secret language into something I can understand? But this truth is a new consciousness with no memory. I hint to you one more time. What passes with ordinary people is some great conversion, a change of mind, a change of spirit, a rebirth. We're talking about, to some degree, in one of those infrasystems of the muscles, the mind, or the respiratory system, and they're examples. They're glaring throughout history, and not just linearly, they're still going on to varying degrees all over the planet. They're religions, they're apparent amusing religious attempts to make an assault on one of those systems, wherein, when it seems to have some effect, just mechanically, that a person involved has some loosening of the hold that the memory has of one of those systems. The way in which they breathe, the whole respiratory system, the way in which they think, or the way in which their muscles remember, that there is any loosening at all, it is experienced as being everything from very unusual to extraordinary experience. But the conversion, relaying it in some way, well, the gods finally smiled on me once I came around. Once I finally admitted my frailties, when I admitted my shortcomings, in some way, spirits, great cosmic, godly powers came in and touched me. There's a loosening of the memory in one or more of those infrasystems. Now, surely some of you suspect that a whole lot of this, and a whole lot of the task and the tricks I have given, fit right into that. And of course, all of my talk fits into that, insofar as I can get closer to Ornette Coleman and further away from David Sanborn. Yes, let me play a few variations on a couple of the measures I have just gone through. That looks very confusing from ordinary historical vantage points, that the mind itself seems to reel under the great weight, if not confusion, of ignorance. And to ignorance, I snap my fingers as Johnny Marcus taught me to do. Click my heels at stupidity, laugh in the face of whatever it was. That life is continually instigating assaults against its own holy structures. That life continually will set up guides only to use them as future targets. It would seem as though St. Quantum's Day is not coming a day too soon. This is a variation, and based upon this immediate response, I may leave it at this little note. It's a variation of what I was pointing out about religion always, no particular religion, but right now all religions, that is, the major ones that seem to be the revealed important religions, in which we were talking about, I guess, 5 religions, are simply wearing out because everyone's heard the jokes. They're no longer as entertaining. It's not an abrupt process. It's been going on, but it's reaching a critical point that the audience, everybody knows the punchline. As I said, people know it now that's never heard it. It is now in the genetic webbing of humanity. It's part of the grid system. But you never heard a man preach a sermon on Leviticus 7:14. But he starts, the minister, the rabbi, somebody says, well, it said here that Jehovah said unto his beloved prophet, if your sister should, and you never heard it before, and you can finish it. You can come almost, and you've never even seen it, you never heard it, and you can almost finish what it is. And you don't know why. You don't know whether it's the demeanor of the rabbi or the way the minister was saying, all right, an important message tonight, and I especially want you men to listen. You can't remember whether it's some kind of verbal or nonverbal hint that he gave, but he suddenly starts quoting this, to you obscure, chapter and verse in Leviticus. That is a book, yeah, Leviticus. And you can almost finish it, and you've never heard it. You just know where it's going. You can turn your head and go, yeah. You can whistle along. You know the kind of thing that David Sanborn is apt to play. But what I'm pointing out, and it passes at the ordinary level very often, the majority of the time, is being something of a questionable nature. That is, humanity is turning its back on former structures of goodness. That humanity is in some way individually, or small little pockets of humans are taking that which was once a charitable and a worthwhile idea, perhaps an activity, and they are now perverting it. They have lost their way. It's again that the guides in some way came down and said, all right, here's some more truth for you. Here's some more of what I want you to do. And by God, it only took us 50 years or 5,000 years. And look what we've done to it, shame on us. Of course, then you got to be back to believing, to operating at the ordinary level, that people are who's, and in some way in a closed system that just people spring forth, and in some way absolutely creative, unbased, ungenetic, some kind of energy, information, ideas, actions, paintings, suddenly flow from them. That you, of course, got to be back at that level. But if you're not, what I'm trying to point, perhaps another small path out of this Red Sea. See, I do know something about the Bible. We've about exhausted my knowledge, though. Is the fact that I've tried to draw out for you of this thing actually being alive, but not being conscious in the way that your forefathers and that your own hardwired voices believe that a God would be, of knowing absolutely what it's doing. It does not. Its stupidity, of course, is on another level, that its stupidity to us would be deep, deep wisdom. Let me leave it at that. But it stumbles. It tries things. It tries all sorts of things. At the same time that the people are somewhere now in a synagogue or a church, people out doing charitable work, right here in the city limits, or probably within a half a mile of us, somebody doing something like that. People contributing money to send to starving people. That's also within this, let's say, 2-mile radius. Somebody's going to kill somebody tonight. Somebody's going to rob an old person, going to knock them down on a street corner. That's all happening within the body of life. So what seems to be humanity's callousness at times toward loving ideas, religious ideas. I'll start back to what I told you that had that bombastic effect. That life is continually instigating within its own body assaults on its own, quote, holy structures, its own temples. And it continually raises up, and I'm using guides in a quotation mark, of course, including everything from what would apparently be a solid organization like the Catholic Church or any church, to the buildings, to the far-reaching tentacles of this thing spreading to many countries, many cultures, to the philosophies, to the ideas behind it, that it continually sets these up, but from one viewpoint. And it's just there. You just have to see it. It sets them up from one viewpoint for one reason, so it'll have something to shoot at. But then it appears that, well, humanity again is just ignoring the goodness and the wisdom that the gods let out here periodically. Or they send out a good man, and what do we do to him? They don't do anything, but God sets them up and he shoots them. He does it everywhere else, but it seems to be particular, odious, and unfathomable to ordinary consciousness is how could this happen in the spiritual realm, in the religious area? And it's not an exception. There are no exceptions. There is one exception to what I've just described of life setting up its own gods, and then continually, it never stops. As soon as it sets up one, it already begins to instigate on another part of town an insurrection. It already begins to plot an assault on this. But there is one exception that some of you should have known anyway. And that would be your own understanding. It just can't be assaulted. There's nobody to assault it. Of course, you always remember you have a comma after it. It can move. But once you begin to get some sensation even verbally of what I'm talking about, then you see the kind of difficulties all of you have been through. Some of you still feel it. Some of you that's getting this from afar really feel it. That in one of my systems at times I feel like this is all moving in some miraculous way. I wish I was there with you in person. There must be some kind of magic flowing that I don't get exactly off the tape or off the written word. There's something. And what is it? It's entertainment tonight. It is a being able to start building your own exception that I have not given. Not that I'm alone. I'm just the last one going along right now. And it appears otherwise historically after the fact to some of these other people, regards these other people. But it seems vague in that, well, at times it sounds as though I've almost made some great statement, as you want to grab a pencil and write it down like, well, if he's ever going to come out with his own 10 commandments, I bet this will be one of them. And then 6 months later, it's all you can do. You have to hold your hand to keep from grabbing a pen and to write me and said, it would sound like to me that you just absolutely refuted what you said, or that new example you made. That doesn't fit at all with what you said 6 months ago. But that is the only exception to life being able to set up gods to knock them down. It's the only exception to this continual action and our thinking about action in regards to an assault upon its own sacred, holy, spiritual structures. The only exception is your own understanding. All right. Paragraph 3.7. Star day? No. I've heard that somewhere. Try this. And I could fill in on this for a long time, but you should be able to, either yourself in what appears to be a long time, or some of you should be able to take this and run right now, or at least get home in the next few days in the closet and run, and find something extraordinary. Consider a spectrum in which all of ordinary life exists. Another spectrum besides some of the ones I have noted, wherein at one end is an ever-present danger of destruction, and at the other would appear to be the anticipatory thrill of discovery. To put crudely, I'm hinting at what would be perhaps a D and a C end of a particular spectrum. And then in the center, you have a swap of middle-aged, or middle age, middle class, slow death of boredom. Has anyone ever given any note on your part to a serious, that is in the sense of what we're doing, attempt or wondering if there was something to be neuralized having to do with the criminal life? How is it, for instance, today, the banking industry and the FBI, of course, may have their own self-serving purposes, but for instance, let's just accept that supposedly in the last few years I've seen figures on several occasions, the average bank robbery in the United States yields something like, if they got the door with it, the average yield is something like $1,200. And yet, people continually rob banks. The point is, do you still, once I ask you to try and reflect upon it for a second, that fast money is the purpose, or that is what drives certain ordinary white people into the life of crime? I suggest to you it's not quite that simple. Psychologists trying to come up with some new psychoanalytic insight or profile as to what makes this guy. We got this one guy, for instance, and they can, of course, expand it, but this one guy, ever since he was a kid, and he didn't actually grow up starving, he didn't grow up in an orphanage, but by the time he could walk, he began to grab money and purses and run. And they'd catch him time after time, put him away, and he'd come out and do the same thing. He gets a little older and he can afford to buy a gun. You know, he walks in and tries to hold up the 32nd precinct. And apparently, there's something loose in this man. Any reasonable, halfway reasonable person would come to the conclusion after 20 years in this field that, hey, this is not as profitable as digging ditches. Or even if he got away with better, if he held up some banks and got away with better than the average, that a man walks away with $50,000 and they catch him 2 weeks later and it's all gone. He goes, ha, ha, ha. All right, so in 5 minutes he stole $50,000. They give him 20 years. Divide 20 years into $50,000. The man could have made more as a short order cook. And so they wonder, what is loose here? I suggest to you, because of life's purposes, at the far ends of this spectrum I have just sketched for you, this ever-present danger of destruction. Now, it does not exist simply as the greenhouse or the playing field for criminals, because people who are not criminals have an awareness of it, the fear. And, be out on the street at night, or I see a certain group of people and I get bad vibrations. I'm going to stop at a 7-Eleven store. I was dying to get a can of beans for tonight, but something's wrong. I'm not even going to stop there. It's the neighborhood. I don't like the way those people are standing. It's a present danger. And it seems, of course, in contemporary times when you're jammed up in close proximity to your fellow man, it seems to be worse. But you got to watch yourself at all times, watch where you're going, because things could just fall apart. The savages could take over. But it's always been there. And at the other end would apparently be that which, compared to that end, the previously mentioned end, would apparently be more of a constructive nature. The kinds of people that would apparently be engaged with kind of or seem to be being fed almost by a kind of warmth, kind of a warm discovery through artistic endeavors or intellectual pursuits. And it seems to be of a more progressive nature, a more creative side. That these kind of people do not normally do each other harm. You don't normally find artists. Well, move on up to intellectuals at least, but mainly including artists. You don't normally find them stabbing each other over, what school of painting should this particular one be put in at this time? Or your latest mathematical model of the subparticle universe I find to be so offensive that I would like to roll up my sleeves and whip you, Professor so-and-so. No, there seems to be, as opposed to people down fighting over a 25-cent throw of the dice out on a street corner. Compared to that, over here it seems to be very humane. There seems to be, in fact, a kind of warm enjoyment as to what they're engaged in. But I specifically was not just trying to play with words again, although, as someone noted recently, that I sure can play with words. There is a kind of cement that I am suggesting to you is very widespread. Is why I described it as being a center swamp of middle age. And of course, you can be middle-aged when you're 20. Most people are. They get 40, and they call that middle age, but then they begin to feel the hot breath of the swamp gases calling them, come home, come home. They begin to feel, they begin to realize from their perception that I am standing in quicksand, and I am going down, and everywhere I look is quicksand. Everywhere I look seems to be that ever-present end of the spectrum that is destruction sitting on hold, right next to ready. But it is a center swamp between these two extremes that I cared to exemplify through my verbal description of it being middle age, middle class, slow death of boredom. What is the fascination? Or why is it so common, I assume you know, to find out that a famous physicist has one hobby. He reads murder mysteries. Why is it? Some of you thought I kept making jokes at the expense of Alabama entertainers, hillbilly music, the National Enquirer, soap operas. What is the fascination? You should all know it's there. Feel the pull. I've never given this as a task, but I'd be very disappointed if some of you hadn't already tried this, whether you put any words on it, is to go past what is obviously or apparently common, I assume you know, to find out that a famous physicist has one hobby. He reads murder mysteries. Why is it? Some of you thought I kept making jokes at the expense of Alabama entertainers, hillbilly music, the National Enquirer, soap operas. What is the fascination? You should all know it's there. Feel the pull. I've never given this as a task, but I'd be very disappointed if some of you hadn't already tried this, whether you put any words on it, is to go past what is obviously or apparently an accident on the highway. And the car is creeping by, and you can see the backs and the arms of some medics, and you can see the light flashes of the lights going on, and you look down, you maybe see broken glass, and you see a car kind of bent over going over the edge of the embankment there, and you see maybe a foot sticking out. In other words, it's pretty obvious. There's probably somebody laying there badly hurt, if not dying. And you have to inch by, single lane traffic, and of course part of the inching is every car gets there and everybody in the car looks. Try to go by there without looking. It's not a trick, it's not a joke, it's not pointing out some folly of humanity. Try to go past when you're just almost certain. There's nothing to talk about. You just know, as soon as you're aware of it, I'm going to look around, there's blood and guts. There's dying going on, extreme suffering, and you feel the pull of it. You try not to look, literally, you try it. Those of you who have not done it, in a sense, I don't guess any of you have really done it until I once describe it. It's not even, you can't find any comparable effort in any of the systems by themselves of trying to bench press 600 pounds or trying to run 52 miles nonstop. It is like everything in you that you can sit here in one system and say, I'm not going to look. I mean, it's not going to serve any purpose. I don't want to look. Somebody surely as conscious, intelligent as I am, why do they need to turn around and look? And you get there, and it's like the whole gravity of the universe goes, I mean, just for a split second. Just try not to. what I was getting at in general is there is a built-in fascination. There is a built-in reaction to this great center place wherein that which seems to be the cementing, civilized white people in all cultures are living in what amounts to a center swamp. I'll stick by my definitions until I change them, or my description of it. It's middle age, it's middle class, and it's a slow death of boredom. And they seek entertainment, and they seek it very often, whether it's obvious to you or not. And I don't mean that it in some way interferes with them playing out their proper center spectrum role, but their main entertainment may be reading gory stories, reading about the life of crime, but themselves out imagining that here it is 11 o'clock and I stop in the 7-Eleven for a can of beans. There's nobody around. And they have little flashing pictures of just suddenly putting their hand in their pocket and saying, "Give me all your money, damn it." It's like a thrill. Oh, would that be something? It's like a discovery. I could do that. Maybe I'd get caught, maybe I wouldn't. But just the thinking about it was almost like a small vacation. And there is a similar kind of situation on the other end of the spectrum that is a bit harder to describe because it is not as common. Because we still have, as I pointed out to you, humanity still rests down at the red level. It is always based there, and still the center of operations, you find more people being drawn to the kind of entertainment, be it vicarious or otherwise, on the end of the spectrum that apparently would be the ever-present danger of destruction as opposed to the other way. But there are similar examples, and I'll leave it to you at the other end. Here is one that maybe you people can deal with. I'll try again to point out to you that this has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with sociology. It has nothing to do with the ordinary world. But I'm going to have to use some ordinary terms. But I am talking about that which is above all of this, that which is yet to be explained verbally, that which yet is capable of being explained in ordinary language. But it is a prime example, it always has been, but right now is a great time in history, to use it again, of what life is doing. And that is, throughout history and right now, life uses what a certain society, a certain country, a certain culture refers to as having in their midst dangerous minorities. Minorities, whether they be racial, religious, ethnic, that there's some minority that in some way are now a part of us, and they're dangerous. The exceptions being, and you should be able to find them, they are all through history and they are extant now, would be segments of life's body. That is, apparently would be countries or cultures wherein it seems to be very homogeneous, that they do not seem to have a, quote, dangerous minority or minorities in their midst that always seem on the basis or seem capable, seem inclined to, at any day now, start trouble. Maybe start a revolt. You find areas wherein it seems to be more homogeneous. And all you got to do is carry that just a little bit further and you have absolute stagnation. Because what I was going to throw at you real quick, because history, in one sense, could be described as this continuing struggle, if you looked at it from the horizontal viewpoint, from an ordinary viewpoint, of constantly bringing these societies, these nations, these empires, and then some dangerous minority seemed to have caused their downfall, either from within, or they started from without, and some way got in, and it brought about the collapse of it. But can any of you see that from one viewpoint, what ordinary consciousness would refer to some situation is within their midst, this group of people, which all we're talking about is a segment of life's body in some location, that within here is some, quote, dangerous minority or minorities, that they help spread energy that a homogeneous group would never spread, and they spur growth in a way that a more homogeneous apparently stable group of people could never do. All right. I sure be glad when I can talk faster. That is, that some of you can hear faster, because these examples are everywhere. Now consider this. Many of you that didn't trip in the midst of that part. That everyone who has any potential has dangerous minorities within themselves. Now, everyone in the ordinary spectrum has dangerous minorities within them, but then what seems to constitute this center swamp, what would seem to use some contemporary terminology, would seem to be describable as more sane, more stable, more dependable people would be those that apparently have no dangerous minorities within them. Middle age, middle class, dying a slow death of boredom. That from one viewpoint, if you can see this, that a part of all religions, jobs, of all so-called psychological health attempts, from one viewpoint, is an attempt by one segment, one part of life's body, to eradicate in certain people or a particular person, is the only thing that, of course, interests that one person, to some way to eliminate, to eradicate, to stamp out the dangerous minorities that were at work in this person. Now you are a much better person. Don't you feel better? Yes, I do. But it would appear to be that part of the purpose of religion, psychology, sociology, civilization, community spirit, love of one's country, love of one's religion, love of one's culture, is in some way to get to the point that I do not feel in danger of these minorities in me. If any of you can hear any of this, please note, I have never done anything, I have never suggested anything, I have never directed you to do anything, if you can see it this way, to try and stamp out those minorities. It's to see them, but it's not to stamp them out. If in some way you could, it's not possible, in a sense. But if it were possible, you would then be a follower. If it were possible, you would then feel satisfied. You would then say, look, you make jokes, but I really would like to have a wallet-sized photograph of you to carry around. I feel so much better, and it's all due to you. Used to, I was filled. I mean, I hate to tell you, maybe you can imagine, I don't want to think about it, what used to go on inside of me. That's why I've told you, if you belong here, I know what goes on inside of you. I mean, you're absolutely awful to ever get here. In a very unusual but specific manner, all of you are terrible, terrible people to ever get here. I mean, any decent person. Decent people never end up here. They just don't. But all of you are terrible. You don't have to tell me, I know it. But note that apparently, from a quite real level, the attempt of religion, mysticism, everything else, is to either satisfy these dangerous minorities or in some way stomp them out or to push them aside. In the sense of what you realize in doing this, you cannot do any of that. It certainly appears that way in people, ordinary people, but you can't do it. And it's everything from a waste of time to self-defeating. If any of you had ever gotten connected with anything that said, all right, here's what we're after. The thing is, you have to see what they are. And you have to cease entertaining them. They're no longer a threat. They are, in fact, a means to spur growth in life itself and in you. But you don't entertain them. You don't take them seriously. They do not speak for you. And once you begin to see it, they do not even attack you. They say, yeah, I know what you're attacking. It's life growing. It's the attempted change attacking resistance. And it comes out of my mouth. It comes into my yellow circuit pictures, it comes out in large groups of people as being religious, racial, nationalistic, and it's none of that. A miscellaneous coda, several things. The task I gave when I asked you people to try and stratigraphize how this apparent existence, how this universe could have been different. And it ranges all the way from notes of saying, I tried my best and I could not even start. It went all the way from that to a handful of people pointed out, well, to actually do that, you'd have to understand how things are now. And therefore, I think you have led me up some kind of trick path. All the way from that to some that apparently made a direct effort, one of which I read last week, that seemed to be humorous in nature to you people. But let me throw in one or two measures here for my ending. I keep dragging out at times the TV show Green Acres, and I don't guess all of you here, much less the people getting this at some other place at some other time, have necessarily heard me describe it or have even seen it. But it was a show wherein there was obviously, once you caught the gist of it, either the first show, the pilot, or once you saw it several times, that there was a central figure of an extremely sane man. They did have him as an attorney, which I don't know whether we can forgive that or not, but a man who dressed up, a man who was sane, he was reasonable and intelligent. And he moved from New York City with his wife into this place called Hooterville, and they moved on the farm Green Acres, and then this cast of characters began to assault them, began to move into their life, and then this sane person, this man, this attorney, well, by all appearances, never stepped out of his role at all, never did anything extraordinary, living there in that center swamp. He suddenly was confronted with a world wherein the rest of them were crazy, except they were all in some way crazy on the same wavelength, that they understood each other, and that things inexplicably happened. And it couldn't happen. All right. No one ever wondered why I kept bringing up Green Acres. Did you really think that in some way that I was, personally, that was one of my peccadillos, that I just stayed home or traveled to other cities where Green Acres was playing? You know, if it can happen out there, it can happen somewhere else. If there is something of any possible benefit out there, which I'm describing as out there, this show Green Acres, wherein there is a center character who is sane, always been sane, remains sane, reasonable, middle-aged, middle class, and around him is a world. Nothing's unusual. Everybody dresses correctly, according to their role. Everybody speaks English. It's not science fiction. They seem to be going about the kinds of activities that people should go about in those conditions. And yet this whole thing is irrational, and they all understand each other, and nobody ever points out to him. They don't ever attack him. They are simply operating on one level that's insane or irrational, non-linear. And things continue to proceed for at least 22 minutes to fill up a 30-minute sitcom. No one sees any possibility no one has ever suspected that at times I play Green Acres on Thursday night. Nah. Next piece of the ending. Along with inquiries as to humor, someone recently really wanted to ask me what I meant. We were staying around in the last few months. I say standing around in an advisedly figurative fashion. And I mentioned something to a person about, hey, you'll just break down and become a Southern Baptist. And I have used variations of that on many of you when I first met you, or the first time we'd have a little party, or we'd throw on a good James Brown album or two. And I said variations of that, and I could tell that in the past, and someone that came out more specifically of late, looked for some great deeper meaning, and it had no reference to any particular religion, and it certainly had no reference to any geographical location. To wit, I'm not talking about Baptist, and I'm not talking about Southern. Well, you must know what I'm talking about. It's kind of a variation of Alabama. It's telling somebody that their center of operations seems to be up in the blue department or the yellow department. And for me, of course, many of them are not accustomed to the way I talk, and even if they were, it's still not accustomed to being able to hear beyond their hardwired senses. I mean, coming up and poking somebody and saying, hey, and they may have a PhD, in mathematics or psychology, I mean, saying, hey, I'll tell you the real trick. I'll tell you a secret now. I'll give it to you free just between me and you. You ought to become a Southern Baptist. I surely wasn't talking about religion or conversion or moving to another part of the country. But only Southern Baptists, only the miners, only the Alabama miners can correctly get down with Brother James. And by the same token, you got no business taking the JBs, Fred Wesley, or any of those cats into a literary meet, into a chess match, into a philosophy class. But to many people that have been attracted to this, that was the level at which they seemed to be operating. That was the level at which they wanted to take what I was saying, that perchance many people seem to immediately find me, my speech attractive, intriguing. How could I stand up for hours on end and just go on and on and on and never repeat myself and say things along the way that you'd never thought about, and some of them almost make sense at an oblique angle. But that's not all there is to it. Some people, and everybody at some time, needs to be a Southern Baptist. End of that strain, that phrase. One more. Can any of you see by now that Kyrute, my time-honored assistant, literary mouthpiece, verbal device, can any of you see by now that Kyrute is equal to life itself and all of its uncertainties and complexity? If I ever do any more, since I'm changing everything, we've probably seen the end of Kyrute, even if I have to forcibly deal with this character, or maybe have to rewrite them, and it should say, and it probably will from now on, ... and life said, ... and then those little pithy and semi-pithy remarks, observations, and jokes. But he has been playing the totality of life with all of its complexities, paradoxes, stumbling, bumbling, and overall uncertainty. All right, one more. How about this? Has anyone ever noted that in spite of all religions continuing dance with pessimism, another pregnant pause, despite their continuing dance with pessimism, they all say that in the end, God will triumph. And ordinary consciousness can't note both. But all religions say that ultimately, goodness will prevail. You should find that interesting. You should find it interesting that it's not noted, both of it. And that religion in general would appear to have as its job the restatement the reinforcement of how bad things are, particular humanity. But, and it's not just something they came up with, not just some way to try and weasel out one's imagination from this fiery or this imagined pit of final destruction. It just seems to go along, except consciousness and the way in which it comes out in religion, they can't both be dealt with simultaneously. That you could go for hours hearing someone speak, or you could go for years reading some holy book or the commentaries and expositions within some religion. That is just one piece of bad news after another, just tracking history, tracking humanity as being apparent who people, continually going against the gods and attacking the very structures that he's established. And it's terrible. And yet, the final message is always this, that ultimately, goodness is going to prevail. The end. Good night. Hello. And it's like two different worlds. And it's not. It's life telling the truth again. It stumbles, and I even describe it to you as in a certain way as being uncertain, but it knows this. It knows that goodness will prevail in the end. Of course, it helps to know what goodness is, and it helps to know where the end is. I'm going to read some of what we have, and I want to remind all of you, for a while I was going to try and keep these tapings, especially the videotape, into a kind of non-linear, out-of-time presentation, not just to keep my words for some mechanical use by posterity. Posterity. Posterior. Posterity. But it was in part because people, even within weeks, months, could hear this, and some of it, when I make it more topical, would seem to limit the field of interest for those listening, but it's more trouble than I find it now worth. And so those of you who get this from afar and at other times, you have to do the best you can. St. Quantum's Day is coming up. We're going to celebrate this Saturday, and I'd like to remind all of you what little I have said in the past and the way in which we have celebrated. You should still use it beyond a kind of cosmic fourth level Mardi Gras, is you should really make some use of it. And I'm not inclined to really tell you how. But I didn't come up with it, this biannual holiday, for an excuse to get drunk, because I don't need an excuse to get drunk. I don't need somebody's permission or to go play softball or for us just to get together. But for me to start out and say, all right, this is a time within certain little restrictions I'd made that all other restrictions were off. You know, go out, go somewhere. Of course, some of the things I told you to get away from us, but go out somewhere, get angry, get in a fight, be insulting, criticize people, laugh at people's religion, laugh at their clothes, point out, just go down the street and look at everybody's nose and laugh and make crude remarks. Do anything you want to. But you still, somewhere in your lucid moments, understand I didn't do this as some kind of holiday like everyone's getting so pent up and so frustrated from not being able to be hostile and thinking I'm always going to be there and look over their shoulder, that here's a chance to let it out and get your health back in order. It's not that. But you should learn something, or you should try and remember to look for something over the fact of me coming up with this and saying, all right, here's what you can do, whether you do it or not. And me pointing out, I'm not telling you to, I'm not encouraging you to, but here, you can go do it. You should use it more. You're just going to have to find your own way, at least between now and next time. And I want everyone, not only here, but this is directed to you people in other cities contemporaneous to this general time, is all of you should be remembering each other, because it is difficult enough in a specific way with you people in these other cities, feeling as though I'm making continual threats, and the last one was a serious threat. It was beyond a threat. that I might abandon even sending out tapes or taking you seriously, but I have got to consolidate and conserve the energy in one specific place. But all of you in the other cities, you should try and remember those that you don't even know, and remember the people here, because I have them directed, and they should be aware of it even without my continual direction of trying to remember you, because it's not a figure of speech. It's not some poetic encouragement that I make up, but literally whatever is going on right now, if it were not for 6 or 8 people in New York, 4 people in San Francisco, if any of that was altered right now, then everything would be affected to some degree. You would not necessarily notice it, but it would be affected. And those people, as far as they can tell, as far as they can feel, that still consider themselves to be a part of this, that's never been here, they are as much here as you are. And I know that that's irrational, and you think it's some sort of spiritual flim-flam or me saying other than what I mean, but it is a fact that I understand. It is a fact that I see and I taste it, and you simply have to take my word for it, that you should try and remember those people in the same way as though they were here. No better, no worse. You don't have to put out an attempted sham love for them just because they're a long way off, which of course is easier to do if you're ordinary. But they're as important as you are sitting here right now. How much tape we got left?
40 minutes.
Well, we had some real good ones I wanted to read here. Some of them are in reference to some of the tasks over the last several weeks, and some I just want to read for the hell of it, because who can stop me? Here's one when I was asking you people to try and find your own other possible responsibilities that might be inherent in those red and blue and yellow departments that I noted for you in life's corporations. That one possible candidate for consideration into another aspect or another description of life's corporation would be the office of president. Not some figurehead, but the real fella who can often be found sweeping up the floor in the mines long after everyone else has gone home. And the person writes, my favorite, in a totally impartial and objective manner, is what they describe as the Yahoo department. I didn't read it all. Trust me, I like it. This is the one where I ask for you to try and conceive of another possible universe other than what is here, in which man could have grown and existed. It seems that I had come up with a really interesting idea for the task of finding an alternative arrangement for the world, but the more I thought about it, the more I could see that life had already done it. I just never saw it before. Does life have trouble keeping track of everything going on inside of itself? It seems to me that the continual attempt by line-level consciousness to learn more and more in a certain way it would be what would presently keep it from becoming more. Then I had one that was thrown into a general paper that I just wanted to note. Somebody gave a definition. They referred to it as the dictionary of tomorrow, if such a thing existed. And the definition would be of the word hostility. And their definition was hostility as accusing another of creating your perception. I just want to read one sentence out of something that somebody wrote me in relationship to some of what I was mentioning last week. It seems that what might be called, quote, real love, unconditional love, would be to the blue circuit, in a sense, what neuralizing is to the yellow circuit. And I would say to you that that is certainly a beginning. Just one sentence out of a whole page I want to extract for you. The person observes, the news seems to make time move more quickly. I think I discovered recently what you refer to as, quote, a real act involving the mind, the muscles, and the respiratory system simultaneously, which seemed to be something completely different from what I had previously thought of as acting. It now seems that this total acting is nothing less than exactly, to the absolute degree, what an ordinary identified person does naturally, except without being identified with the act, rather being in complete control and able to turn it on or off at will and not take personally anything directed at the role you're acting. If I can improve on something, I admit to you. Well, you've never heard me try to sing like James Brown. Here are a couple referring to the task of last week of going out and, by my definition, or the rough sketch I gave you, of trying to speak to someone else in a loving fashion. Those people I sent you out to the shopping mall. Something new to me happened during the task, that is, trying to speak lovingly. I had the feeling I was inside of the people and yet was unnoticed. They spoke to me as though they would to a close friend, and I acted as though I was. Heretofore, I felt like an alien in talking to strangers. Same task. This task was good, to say the least. I wish you had been there to see the lights light up in people's eyes. And there is an effect of my being alive, an exchange of energy with an aim for a good old life. Bless its soul. And we had, they kind of got mixed around. Kind of got, I think is what they say in the minds. It seems as though, without me having to break this down into an unbelievably lengthy preface, these seem to be related in part to trying to come up with a new universe, a potential universe, and the one, if you remember specifically, of last week, of me asking you if you could find examples of human behavior wherein you could see that normally more than one of the systems could be involved, or more than one of the senses, when I asked you to do the task last week, could be involved with something, and yet you could see in a certain way that you could take out, at least in a stratogram, one or more of the senses that might normally be involved, and the thing would still operate, and perchance might operate even more efficiently. Everyone remember that? Well, these are kind of, several people sort of run them together. These I have marked in my secret code that says star, read, funny. So if that will help you, and I wanted to skim a couple of these I like. This one is just labeled some questionable types. A dancer who looks at his feet. A politician who uses his ears to listen to other people. A garbage man who gets involved with the smell of things. These are still sort of, if you're following, they're still funny, but of how different senses might get involved in certain ways that, of course, they made them funny, some of these, as opposed to really responding to what I said, but it's fine with me. Trusting your dentist. Daydreaming in a minefield. Living in Gary, Indiana. Laughing and eating. Driving a car with a clutch while wearing very high heels. And trying to think with a full bladder. A few more along the same lines. This one labeled the conflict of senses, along the same lines. Smelling the musk, comma, seeing the ox. Going for a touchdown to the wrong goal. Girdles. Licking a woman all over, comma, tasting her deodorant. Having your owner come home with 50 pounds of dry dog food. And last, but not surely you know what, wearing a pretty sundress, comma, when you're not a woman. Adios.